Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 68 of Ask the CEO with Abraham Gottheil. Today, I'd like to introduce a very special guest. He's the CEO of Spearhead Management in Germany. He is an accomplished speaker in the areas of executive leadership, blockchain, artificial intelligence, and agile business management. He has authored numerous publications on areas of high tech, such as cybersecurity, as well as other business-related topics. Currently, he mentors executives and startups on areas of IT, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, blockchain, agile business management, supply chain, executive leadership, and emotional competence. He earned a doctorate in operations management, manufacturing, and applied information technology, an executive MBA in executive leadership, and an MBA in manufacturing supply chain. It is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Johannes Drooghaag. Welcome, JD.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this very kind and detailed introduction. It is my pleasure to be on your show. I'm very proud about this invitation and the opportunity to talk to your audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining. So, JD, as an accomplished cybersecurity industry expert, what keeps you up at night?
Well, there are basically two things that keep me up at night. The one thing is everybody using IT technology without being aware of all the risks involved in using that. It can be a child of 14-year-old using a mobile phone and knowing nothing about all the bad people out there in the internet wanting to abuse at least that device or the person behind it. That keeps me awake. And the second thing that keeps me awake is the industrial automation that we have out there. 80% of our infrastructure and industry was not built this century and is also not aligned and built for this century's cyber threats. And that's a risk, and that keeps me awake. We need to act. We need to do a lot of things. And there are good things happening, but they're not happening fast enough. And that keeps me awake. Those are my two main concerns when I try to sleep.
You know what? I can so relate to that, because if you think about it, all this automation and as well as like what you're talking about, stuff that children use, you know, baby monitors and baby dolls and things like that that are connected to the internet. They were created as novelties or as matters of convenience and without really having security in mind.
Exactly. There is, in many of those cases, security was not a consideration. Security is not put as a priority to, for example, the parents who buy this as a nice toy for the kids. It's never been put on their radar scope, so they're not even aware of it. They have this nice doll, and that nice doll gets once a month an update with a new story, and everybody's happy. But they don't realize that somebody could hack that connection and do whatever they want with it.
Terrorize the children.
Exactly. And this is on the one hand something where I believe that the manufacturers of those services and those products should do significantly more and be much more vocal about what it actually means to have this fancy child toy or this interesting app that the kids put on their phones and their tablets and their computers. And on the other hand, the people who do understand and do know could do significantly more in helping the parents understand what their kids are dealing with. I do that, for example, in my program. I'm doing that now since a little over 5 years. Internet safety for kids. And it's two components. One is I help the parents understand what the kids will be dealing with and how the parents should respond to that. What should they look for? What items should they focus on? What should they be very careful about? And the second part is, together with the parents or the parents with the children, explain the same thing to the kids. Now, that's an interesting challenge because the kids, they're very smart. They pick up stuff much faster than we adults do because they think less about it. But they use a different language. They listen with a different speed. It's read
more intuitive to them.
Exactly. So all the people who do understand can do much more in helping the people who do not understand. That's one side. And the other side is those companies who manufacture it and those companies who sell it could take much more responsibility by explaining what it actually means and not just look at, hey, I made a couple of bucks in selling somebody something that they don't really understand.
And I think it boils down to we, the consumers, need to be more discriminating about which products we choose.
Exactly. And look much more at what does this mean? Why does a football have an RFID chip? Do I need that to play football?
Yeah,
No.
Trump's soccer ball.
Exactly. But that was not just Trump's soccer ball. Those are hundreds of thousands of balls of that type sold around the World Championship in football. And now we got a whole lot of footballs around with an RFID chip. Why? And what is that thing doing? And the company Adidas that delivered that ball has that on their website. You can look at all the details of what that RFID chip is actually doing. But most people don't inform themselves. And I went to 2 shops just to check. I was curious. I went to 2 shops of whom I know that they sell this football. There was no information. There was nothing saying, people, pay attention. There's an RFID chip in this football, and you can install an app by which you can communicate through this RFID chip with the ball and all kinds of... That was not there. So people buy the ball, are not informed about there's technology involved, which still doesn't mean it's bad technology, but it's technology which is there, and they don't discriminate on it. They're not informed about it. The vendor is not doing an active job in informing, so it's never triggered, right? Nobody is going to look at it.
Nobody's the wiser.
Exactly. Until Mr. Trump gets that ball. And everybody talks about that ball, but nobody talks about what's with the millions of kids who have that ball at home and the parents who don't know what is going on there.
Now, do you think that regulations like GDPR would have an effect on things like this?
GDPR is a framework which very clearly defines what are the rights of the consumer when it comes to when the consumer provides data. And on the other hand, and this is the thing which I like about GDPR, what are the rights of the consumer when the consumer says, no, I don't want you to have my data anymore. I've stopped using your service and I do not want you to own my data anymore. That's a very good part. But that is just a regulation about an existing relationship between a consumer and a company. What we do not have is when the consumer is either not aware of that data relationship, has never entered in that data relationship, and GDPR basically says, well, that's not allowed. But there is no institution around it that says, well, we're going to make sure that nobody can actually do that. So GDPR helps for a very particular part. And it helps for mainly organizations like banks, et cetera, which already have a certain level of transparency and they're now forced to have a more transparent data relationship with their consumers. Where GDPR and other frameworks do not help is around the criminal activity. And you got a lot of criminal activity in collecting personal data, selling personal data. There's this gray zone, which is not officially illegal, but it's also not really legal, how data is collected and sold and used. You see that looking at your mailbox every single day. Every person who has been active on social media for a period of 2 years or more does still continue to receive all kinds of emails, all kinds of offers, all kinds of commercials, all kinds of ads from companies never interacted with, but they're still there.
Yeah.
Right? And somewhere in some policy of some platform, and this is the fun thing, and it still works on the GDPR, you can now authorize a company to provide your data to a future partner.
That's how they get it.
That's how most companies do it. So when you would actually read the small text, which we all do, of course, we all read all those.
We need artificial intelligence just to go through those 50 pages of fine print.
Exactly. But there, in most cases, you will see that it's not just a consent for now, it's a consent for the future. And that means they sign up a new partner somewhere in the future, and that partner, by your previous consent, now is authorized to also receive your data. You were never aware of that because the contract wasn't signed, right? You did not know that that future partner or partners are going to also receive data about your behavior and your preferences, etc., etc., etc. So there, even GDPR has its weaknesses. But that's in a world where still rules apply. There's also the world where rules don't apply. And but I use this always in my workshops. I use this following example. Okay, guys, I showed up for this workshop. That means I had to fuel up my car because I need gas, right? So I use my miles and more, and I use my payback card, and I use my credit card. My license, there's a video system at the gas station, so my license has been seen, right? Then I drive from wherever I am to here. During that trip, there's traffic control,
electronic toll,
all those stuff. I leave all kinds of fingerprints everywhere, and I'm not even aware about it. So I now come here. I signed up for this workshop, just like you guys. So I provided some ID. I provided my credit card. I booked a hotel. They also wanted my credit card. Hey, they got bonus program. Of course I used the bonus program. I get stuff from that. So for just one workshop in one location, I leave at least 100 fingerprints. And I'm not even aware of that. And maybe 10 of those are actually where I interacted with. And 90 others, they just interact with me and they receive information. And as long as that is in good hands, still no problem. But as soon as somebody in that chain of fingerprints wants to abuse those fingerprints, it's a big pile of information. And in most cases, there's very little I can do about it other than, okay, I don't travel places, I don't pay with credit cards.
Live in a cave, right? We can't do that. It's not practical.
That's not practical. But even if I live in a cave, I can go to the city website and check my address. So even if I would live in a cave, as soon as the cave is registered, there's data about me. And then the city, the province, the state, the country want to have taxes. So, hey, my cave is registered, right? It's amazing. And the interesting part is that we as people and we as companies and we as employees and we as consultants and we're not aware about it unless a big breach is in the news again. Or we see that there has been a major problem at some credit card instance. Those are the moments that we get aware of it. Visa had a downtime a few weeks ago. Suddenly, all the Visa people are aware of how many times a day they use the Visa credit card because it's not working. In all other normal cases, that's somewhere subconscious. You're not registering in your mind how many times you leave your fingerprint with data, right? How many times you use your credit card, put it in the device, and all the data is required to abuse your credit card is on that card. So if that device is not the real device, but something which is manipulated, there goes your credit card.
So what are some of the practical things that we as consumers or we as just ordinary people can do to protect ourselves?
The first and most important thing is, before you provide information, take one step back and ask yourself, why? Why do I, at this moment, provide this information? A very common method is that you need to identify it you need to identify yourself as a person and being 18 or older or et cetera, by entering your credit card details. Why? Why should I enter my credit card details? One of the things is most people, when they order something online, they enter their credit card and they save it because it's convenient for the next time. Now your credit card details are not just used for this one purchase, they are in an account. In an account on that website is your credit card. So next time when you want to purchase something, yes, very convenient that you have your credit card details already stored. But if somebody hacks in your account,
or someone hacks into their account,
onto their account, there's also your credit card. Yeah. Think, that's step one. And then there are amazing amounts of small logical steps. I seen that last time I was in a hotel. There's a bus of tourists coming in, and they all leave their passports there. And then somebody from the hotel is going to do all the check-ins and all, and that pile of passports is still laying there. And these people get their keys and they go to their rooms. And then at one point, somebody from the hotel is making copies of all those passports. And then after a while, the tourists come and pick up their passports. I don't. I bring a copy of my passport. If they want to see my passport, here's my passport. We need a copy. Here you go. And that copy has my signature over it. About 10% of the falsified passports come from such instances where people just leave their passport for a certain period of time out of their control, right? And everything you need from that passport to make a fake version of that passport, which of course the technicians will immediately identify that this is not a real passport, but the data which you need to book a trip, the data which you need to book a flight,
it's good enough.
It's good enough, right? And some 10% of those cases really come from situations where people just left their passport somewhere and then 2-3 hours later picked it up again. It's what was not in their control. You see the same thing with credit cards. You eat in a restaurant, you want to pay by credit card. In most cases, they will come with the very fancy device to your table. You put your credit card in, you type your PIN code, you take your credit card out. There are also cases where the waiter will take your credit card, go to the back office, and comes back with a paper and your credit card that you need to sign. I don't never leave my credit card in anybody's hands when I'm not there. I want to see what they do with that credit card. Simple tricks. Those are basic things. I did an interview with somebody who is in the illegal business of dealing with credit card data a few years ago. And he told me that about a third of the credit card data that they have is not stolen from websites. 2/3 is through websites and all kinds of other things through hacks. But about 1/3 is obtaining credit card data from people they pay a little money to collect data, who work in stores, who work in shops, so they take that card, they take pictures of the credit card. They have a device mounted and they take a picture of both sides of the credit card and they hand it back to you. You don't even notice if you're not paying close attention. So those are triggers to pay attention to your documents, pay attention to your information, pay attention to your credit card. And before you hand it somewhere, think why. Why am I doing this? Why do you need it? Why do you need my address if my email would be sufficient?
You know, that makes so much sense. Many people just do things automatically when people ask them for it. I know here in the United States, we have this thing called a Social Security number, which is a primary form of identification for financial matters. And many times people ask for it and there's no valid reason for it.
Exactly. And what I've heard many occasions is, yes, but with the Social Security number, there is logic in it, so we can then check if that person is a real person or not. That's one plausible reason. But it also means that if there's logic behind it, I can guess it.
Yeah.
That's risky.
Yeah.
Plus,
But anyways, it all boils down to simple common sense.
common sense is very important.
Great. And by the way, JD, that internet workshop that you give, is there a website or URL for that where people can check that out?
Yes, there's on my personal website, johannesdrooghaag.com. There are several entries for that, and I keep refreshing that, of course. I have started to put, but that's not complete yet because I need to do some additional editing. I've started to put some on YouTube. And the end of August, we're going to release a full updated version of Internet Safety for Kids. That is also going to be on my website again, johannesdrooghaag.com. And I'm very happy to say that a couple of people also helped with translating the text in that workshop. So we now have it in English, we have it in Dutch, of course, we have it in German, we have it in Russian. Some people are working on the French edition. And this is for me a very important thing, because the more languages we have available, and it's 2 videos, 1 video for the parents or teachers and 1 video for the kids. The more languages available, the more people that can use it. And it's twice 10 minutes. It's a very good investment.
So when is the Hebrew language coming out?
I'm looking at you.
We'll have to talk offline.
Let's do that. Yes, I want basically that everybody who has children or works with children as a teacher is basically able to say, hey, I'm going to look at this and I will invest 10 minutes to really review what is this about. And then I will invest 10 more minutes with the kids so they are better prepared. It doesn't mean that they're now 100% safe. They just better understand what the issues are, and they better understand what they need to take care of. And this is the coolest thing. Once you explain it to the kids in a way that they really can relate to, they take much better care of it than most adults I know. Because most adults, after 2 days, forgot about it. And the kids come back and say, hey, look, this is now on my mobile phone. That's not right. Right? They start asking questions and they start checking, and they want to know if they understand it correctly. It's really interesting and it's really cool.
Yeah, they want to do what's right, and they want to follow the rules.
Exactly.
So JD, by now we're familiar with the term Industry 4.0, which I believe was given by the German government, right?
Exactly. That in 2012 they introduced this method. What I find very intriguing is that out of this whole concept of Industry 4.0, the main focus is on Internet of Things and digital transition. But Industry 4.0 is about a lot more. It's about creating flexible industry. So we no longer have to build those great batches of products, that we are able to do a single piece flow. We produce a part, you need one part with this specification, let's make it. You see it in the car industry, for example. It's not a product which you can customize so much as a car. You have hundreds and hundreds of different options when you start to select a car that cannot be efficiently produced with the old industrial system, which is based on mass production, on large volumes, batches of 5,000 times the same thing, and then you change the machine. So Industry 4.0 is a concept of, let's make sure that we have good data structure. Let's make sure that we have good information about all the steps in the processes. Let's make sure that this is no longer a centralized universe, but individual sensors, edge systems. But also, let's make sure that the production processes become very flexible, that we can make quick changes, that we produce significantly less waste, that we do this with much better energy efficiency. So this whole concept of Industry 4.0 is about being able to respond to what the consumer and the market wants, and also the understanding that if we today know what the consumer wants, the latest next week, we have no clue what the consumer wants because the consumer keeps changing. So not a fixed concept for today, a flexible concept by which we can continue to react to all the changes that the consumer and the market wants from us. And that is Industry 4.0.
And which takes us to the next topic, which is AI, because that's the cornerstone of Industry 4.0. Now,
Definitely.
AI is here to stay, right? And one of the practical benefits of AI is the way it can analyze data at such a rapid pace in a way that for humans will be inefficient or impossible, similar to like what we just discussed, the way you can switch gears so quickly from one type of manufacturing to another. We're just coming off an episode that we did on healthcare. So can you share some of the innovative things that you've seen with AI in healthcare?
One of the things that I've seen, and I have never been aware of that, is that a person, a human being, can basically analyze 4 to 5 data points. When they are in a relationship, it's most of the time 3. So if you look at an analysis of a health issue, a very qualified physician will go through the information which is provided, and not sounding respectless, we call that data points. He gets some data from the patient, he gets some data from other researchers, he has a lot of information from his studies and experience. And good physicians continue to learn, but still they have limited access to the data points and restricted capacity to process that. What I've seen recently is a very, very interesting project where AI is used to speed up that first process of all the different possibilities of the gigantic library of treatments and symptoms and what does the patient show and what not. And then by the end comes up with a very detailed file of findings and data that is given to the physician, and the physician is significantly more efficient in putting up the diagnosis. What is the reason that this patient is seeing, is showing these symptoms, but is not showing those symptoms, right? Speeding up the process for the physician itself, making the path which many patients go through. They first go to their local physician, then they send the transfer to a hospital, and they go to another specialist, and then some tests will be done here, and lack of capacity, waiting list. If you're unlucky, you got 2 months until you finally get to the point where people actually know what the problem is, and then they have to figure out how to solve that problem with you.
And then hopefully they made the right assessment.
Exactly. And what you then see in many occasions is that a patient is basically sent to the wrong specialist because it was not recognized properly. Or what you can see is that a patient has to follow a certain set of rules before finally ending up with the right specialist who is able to identify what's happening. And I've seen a very interesting project where AI is really shortening this up. The general physician taking the normal information that goes through a very fast stream of analysis where it's not 4 or 5 data points. It can be 1,000 data points. And the library is extremely huge. And the next physician is already a specialist who is confirming or requiring some additional data about the findings of AI. And that's in the interest of the patients, of course, but it's also in the interest of the physicians, because most physicians, and I know a couple of them myself, they just want to do the best possible thing for their patients. Their restrictions is time and budget.
Yeah.
So That's one of the things I really like about the application of AI in the field of medicine, that it can help both sides of the table, the patient who needs help and the physician who really wants to help. He just has to go through all the steps to make the proper diagnosis. And that's one of the things I cannot wait for the next step in AI.
For sure. And, you know, you hear about waiting lists where people have to wait for months to see a specialist. And perhaps AI can help speed that up as well, because a lot of that time spent diagnosing and misdiagnosing and repeat tests and things like that can be eliminated with AI.
Exactly. And I expect a lot there. I also expect a lot in when we talk about waiting lists, is simple optimizing. And I have a lean background. I do this automatically. This happens in the back of my head. Optimizing capacity, right? Make sure that the laboratories and the specialists get assigned the real cases where they can actually contribute, and do that in an optimized manner. Do that as quick as possible, and do that with the proper resources. And AI can help there. AI can say, doesn't make sense to do this laboratory test because for this particular suspected illness, this laboratory test doesn't give us any information. Let's do this other one. All kinds of thinkable scenarios.
And let's keep track of how many times we sent this poor patient for the same test.
Exactly.
So this is a perfect segue to our next topic. So let's talk about blockchain. You know, everyone associates it with cryptocurrencies, and we're starting to see so many more applications for blockchain than we've ever imagined. From healthcare to manufacturing and even real estate, everyone's jumping on that blockchain bandwagon. What types of creative applications are you seeing out there?
Well, the first thing I want to say is that there's still a lot of hype around blockchain, and what you see is that a lot of organizations are calling blockchain, and when you ask them what is it, silence. So I think 50% of what we currently see in blockchain is not really blockchain. It's just like a test of what could be blockchain. The very creative things that I'm seeing is, for example, in the car industry. When you buy a car, you have one contract with the dealer that is going to sell you that new car. But in reality, that car is some 500 to 1,000 contracts to supply the around 30,000 components which are needed to make that one car. And then there are some 200 contractual partners involved, logistics companies, et cetera, et cetera. It's a whole chain of contractual relationships for that simple one car. After you bought that car, you need to pay taxes, insurance, you have to have service on it. At one point in time, something breaks, so you need to replace it. That's the second life cycle of that car.
Recalls, I'm sure.
Exactly. And that involves, again, a lot of contractual obligations. Now, one of the interesting things that you will then see is the second owner of that car, and in average around, especially in Europe, in average, every car has about 10 owners until it's scrapped. Right? So the 10 people having that one car until it ends up somewhere in a scrapyard. Owner number 6, of course, wants to know, am I buying it with the real 150,000 or does it have 450 already, but it only shows 150? You want to know if the service is done because that has influence on the value of the car. But the car manufacturer already wants to know during the guarantee period, there was an issue detected with the brakes of a particular type. Do I have to recall all the cars with the brakes from this type from that particular vendor? Or can I identify out of the 150,000 models which I've sold, the 12 cars which has the one technical issue? Is that possible for us? Can I really put it down to a smaller lot and just recall the ones who actually have that problem? And there we see blockchain with the distributed ledger, meaning the suppliers put their fingerprints, all the components, and 30,000 components to build one car. That's a lot of suppliers. And when they put their fingerprints for the parts in the blockchain, and the car manufacturer then shares that blockchain with the owner and the next owner, etc., etc., then it becomes possible to say, we are not going to recall, one example with airbags, malfunctioning airbags, 560,000 cars recalled.
It's a lot of waste for 12 cars that have that.
12,000 cars that actually had the defect, which is still a lot, but it could have been reduced to the actual number, right? And later analysis showed that it would have been possible to identify those cars, but that analysis, because all the data was not available, would have taken so long that we probably would have had some lethal accidents, and we didn't want that, and the car supplier didn't want that. So the car manufacturer said, I pull back all the cars, my cost, I solved the problem. A lot of problems solved which were not a problem. So that is something where blockchain can really make a difference. When we look at the financial sector, and there's a lot of activity at the moment, which is really focused on the results and the benefits of blockchain. In the financial sector, you see so much redundant data between different partners in the financial transactions. You see very complicated processes around that redundant data and the management of that redundant data. Bring that together, especially when it's cross-border, then it gets even more complicated because then central banks are involved. Bring that together in a blockchain, have that information stored once, shared, have that information therefore also transparent, and have that information in a way that we make sure that everybody is using the same data. You can optimize processes around that. You can reduce costs around that. You can make processes which today are manual, you can make them automated. And you have a built-in trust component due to the blockchain. Because if I now change my record, that record is changed through all the partners in the blockchain. So if all the other partners in the blockchain have a different record, then we know, you try to cheat me, right? And that's a very interesting application of blockchain, where we basically say we can reduce so much of what we are all doing the same to all doing that one thing, that we have significantly less cost, we have significantly less resources, significantly less risk of mistakes. That's and that I think is one of the coolest things that we can achieve. The part I'm still concerned about is the required resources, energy consumption, computer capacities to have those massive blockchains around the world. That is something we have to work on. We must.
And it's interesting because, as you know, quantum computing is coming out, and it'll be streamed soon, and that's going to solve a lot of problems, but yet it's going to create a slew of additional problems with regards to cybersecurity.
Oh, definitely, definitely. There has been an experiment, and that was done by a peer-to-peer network. Is it possible to crack a 256-bit hash code? It took 5.5 years, but the code was cracked. Good. Then Mr. Snowden made some publications that there are particular partners who have enough capacity to do that already significantly faster. We're not happy about that, because that kind of encryption is basically, in our thinking, something that you cannot crack. That doesn't make sense. And if you can crack it in 5 years, well, then it's so old, nobody cares.
Yeah.
When we talk about quantum computing, that's going to be a matter of minutes, if not seconds. And what we now consider brute force, right? That you just say, okay, I got no clue, so I'm just gonna I'm just going to smack it with all brute force. And when it comes to hashes, that means you're just going to try every thinkable combinations. What we now see, if you take an MS Office Word document and you encrypt that, and I don't mean password protect, you save it as an encrypted document, and you have adequate text in that document, it's going to take some 10 to 14 years with current capacity if you put a really fancy computer to hack that. Good, you can split it up and say, I bring in a bunch of people, or I hack a bunch of computers, and I'm going to reduce that to maybe 2 years.
It's still plenty of time.
It's still plenty of time. When we talk about quantum computing, that's a joke. So what we then need to do is come up with encryption and with hash and with cybersecurity methods, which basically, again, put the required effort so far ahead of what quantum computing can provide, as we currently do. We currently say the blockchain, the encryption in blockchain is so secure, there's no capacity available. Then we see some cases, well, it's not always right, but we're still ahead of what nowadays computer capacity can actually achieve. When quantum computing is coming, and it's coming up fast, we need to figure out how can we put our safety measures so far ahead of quantum computing as we currently believe that we are with our current safety measures compared to the current computer capacity. And my concern a little bit is that the resources required to provide a safety from quantum computing are going to be so enormous that they're not going to be available to everyone. That's a little bit of my concern.
And you know, that's just a great thing to think about. And it takes us back full circle to how we started the conversation, which is the concern about IoT for consumer and industrial IoT solutions, because these manufacturers that are making the devices today need to be thinking about what's coming out in the next 5 years and manufacture their IoT solutions. Well, maybe not for protection against quantum computers, but with the capability of applying patches or some kind of an update down the road so that when that threat becomes real, if it's within that prescribed lifetime of that device, that they need to be able to figure that out.
Exactly. And this is a wonderful initiative started by Siemens at the safety conference in Munich. It's called Charter of Trust. And a lot of companies have already signed up for that Charter of Trust. IBM is on board, Dell is on board, a lot of more. And in the Charter of Trust is basically 10 strategic points. And one of them is we are obligated to provide patches and updates during a reasonable lifetime. And one of the obligations the partners sign up for is security by design, by default. We have to focus on security and not figure it out later. Education is one of their strategic points, their obligation to provide education. And this Charter of Trust is one of those initiatives, and it's spreading. More and more partners are signing up, is one of those initiatives by which the manufacturers of the technology and the key users of those technologies say, yes, we are responsible. And we sign up for that. That's our commitment. We sign up for that responsibility. And I think that's a wonderful initiative. And that gives us at least vendors and manufacturers who are aware of what is happening and aware of their obligation and responsibility. And it's a big improvement compared to, let's say, 5 years ago.
Yeah. And I'm so happy to hear about that. And I think that's going to become the gold standard for IoT moving forward.
My advice currently to my clients, and I assume that I will continue to do that for a long time, is when your vendor is not signing up to Charter of Trust,
that's a warning sign.
That's not a good sign.
Yeah.
Right? And the second advice is you can take that Charter of Trust and say, hey, this is my policy, and I'm going to mirror that Charter of Trust. So Education, yes. As an organization, we are now going to take care of cybersecurity education. They expect that on the devices for a reasonable life cycle, patches, upgrades must be available. Okay, I'm going to purchase material based on that requirement. So if you as vendor are not willing to sign up for those patches and upgrades and security, hey, I don't want to shop with you anymore, right? That's the thing you can do with that.
The onus is on us. We the consumers, we the corporations who are buying this technology, we need to make that our standard, like you said, and demand that. And the market, the free market, will decide who ends up a viable solution in the future.
Exactly. Let's use that buying power that we have and not use enough.
Exactly. So JD, what's next for Industry 4.0?
What's next for Industry 4.0 is, I assume that, or maybe I should say, I hope that there's going to be a cleanup of some of the older industry. We got some older industry which is polluting the environment, and we should focus on that. There is a big demand for making those machines and equipment which are currently still working but are not flexible enough. Let's make them flexible, and let's make some decisions. Can we retrofit them, or do we need to replace them? That's one thing that's going to consume a lot of attention, a lot of budget. And moving forward to the future, I am 100% convinced that AI is going to be an even bigger thing in Industry 4.0 than big data is, because AI will help us faster decisions, put the decision at the place where it should be, put the supervisor or even the operator of a machine, provide him with the proper information based on which he can make decisions. Is this the right quality? Do we need to make some changes? Do we need to make a check on that? I think that is going to play a big role. And with a few upgrades to the concept of Industry 4.0, we can add the fingerprints of everything we do in a blockchain, so we can create transparency. And that is what I believe is going to happen out of Industry 4.0, much more transparency. So the consumer at the end can say, okay, I bought this t-shirt of the brand I like, but I want to make sure that that is not produced somewhere in an Asian country by 10-year-old children. I want to know where this comes from. And I got a certificate, not just a label. No, that's a blockchain-based confirmation.
Wow, fighting child slavery. Wow.
Those are things we can do when we all do it, right? And this is what, and as I said, what I expect on one hand, but also what I hope for a lot, that we can do those things, and we create that level of transparency and put that decision back where it belongs, the consumer. When the consumer refuses to buy bad products, very soon
they're not going to make them anymore.
We're not going to make them anymore.
Exactly. What a great way to wrap up this episode. So JD, how do people find you?
They can find me in various ways. My website, johannesdrooghaag.com. They can find me on Twitter, Dr. J. Drooghaag. They can find me on LinkedIn, of course. I use as much as possible my always the same name. I have recently put some things on my YouTube channel, also under the same name. That will be improving in the coming weeks. So the best way is either contact me on my website, johannesdrooghaag.com, or send me a quick email, johannesdrooghaag.com@gmail.com. I do my best to respond as soon as possible.
Great. And I'm going to post that in the show notes so people don't have to remember that. They can just click on that and get right to it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great. JD, do you have any parting words of wisdom that you'd like to share with the audience?
my biggest thing, and I realized that I became aware of it too late. I could have been aware of that earlier, but now I'm a father of kids, so you look at the world different, right? It's August, and that means there's still plenty months left in the year. We have already consumed more out of our planet Earth this year than the planet Earth can produce during this year. Every little step all of us will take to reduce that is something, and this is for me personal, something you do for my kids, we do for all the kids. So my words of wisdom is what my mama told me. Don't do stuff for yourself, do it for your kids.
Love that. JD, thank you so much for sharing your time and your wisdom. I really enjoyed having you on the show.
It was my pleasure, and I'm honored that I'm on this show. Thank you very much.